Welcome to Silver and Black today, the post-game edition of our Odyssey original podcast. The Raiders 40-34 winners, 40 spot, folks. Raider Nation has to be excited tonight as the Raiders move to 4-7. They go to Seattle. They now win 2 in a row on the road in what has been a difficult year. And the Raiders started off rocky, but boy, did they finish on track in this one, winning in overtime. And everybody out there has to be excited as this team, as I said throughout the week, this team to put together 2 wins, to go to Seattle and win this game would be very big for this team just to continue that role, that gain that confidence and kind of find their identity. Was it perfect? No. We'll talk about that, but a lot to talk about from the positive side of things. And to do that, as always, on these post-game shows, I am joined by our good friend, and that is Mr. Murf from, I'm switching my cameras back and forth here. Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. He joins us now. He is traveling. You're in Florida, right, Murf?
I'm actually in the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. I came down to visit. Yeah, I came down to visit my son, who's stationed at the CB base in here in Gulfport, Mississippi, serving in the world's greatest Navy. And so shout out to my son Tristan. Appreciate his service and all the young men and women that are serving there at the CB's base. But yeah, so I'm traveling and so I'm looking out the Gulf of Mexico on one side, and I got to watch the Raiders win a football game on the other side. I got to celebrate it with my son. This is the first time. He said, "Dad, this is the first time in a few years I think I can remember sitting down and watching a whole Raider game with you, and they actually won."
Well, see, it's a good holiday weekend. Thanksgiving, of course, wrapping up tonight. Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving. And it's great that you got to spend it with your family. My college-age son is here, too, as well. So it's been a great, and I'm sure for all of you out there with family, friends, or loved ones. So we wish you had a good one. It was a great Sunday, Murph. And as you talked about, this Raider team showed resilience. It started rocky, the interception on the first play from Derek Carr, missing Devontae Adams there. And you're like, oh, no, here we go. But they kept it together pretty well. Give me your initial reaction to this game, how this team played. And, of course, we'll dive into the particulars as we move along.
You know, the thing that stood out to me most, Scott, was that it is confirmed that the Seahawks have the absolute worst uniforms in all of football, and their fans are highly overrated. But neither here nor there. But in all seriousness, on the field, this Raider team showed a lot of resiliency today. We saw a lot of plays that didn't go the Raiders' way. Right, we saw a lot of mistakes happen, but I think that as I speaking of my son, I tell him all the time. Your character is not defined by the mistakes you make. Your character is defined in what you do in response to those mistakes. And at times when the Raiders would make a mistake, like, I don't know, not converting on a 4th down. But and by the way, can we stop throwing the ball back 6 yards when it's 3rd and 6 inches or 4th and 6 inches to go? Drives me nuts when we do that kind of stuff. But anyways, like you have those kind of mishaps in the game, but then you continue to fight. The team continues to play for Josh McDaniels. As much criticism as this coaching staff has been under throughout the course of this season. That narrative that there was a disconnect or, some kind of dysfunction between coach and players or coaches and players. The Raiders have now continued to defy that now 2 weeks in a row. And so it's great to see. And I'm always proud to be a Raider fan, but it always feels a little extra something when you pull out a game on the road in Seattle, where historically we don't play all that great as of late.
Absolutely. And Seattle playing well. I mean, of course, they've been one of the stories of the NFL. They discard Russell Wilson to the Broncos, who again lose today. Just look terrible. Russell Wilson now getting an earful from his teammates on the sideline, as we saw in the video too. So just horrific situation for those folks in Denver, and smiles on the face of Raider Nation because it is the misfortune of the donkeys, as the Raiders fans call. But you look at that situation, you look what happened in Seattle, and you knew it was going to be a tough game. I had a hard time picking the Raiders just because 2 games in a row on the road, that defense has done pretty well against the run. But guess what? They've never faced Josh Jacobs when Josh Jacobs is running in a contract year. Josh Jacobs, are you ready for this, Murph? I don't know. I'm sure you saw the stats. 33 carries, 229 yards, average of 7 per play, 2 touchdowns. And of course, he had the 86-yard run to win the damn ball game. So you look at what Josh Jacobs is. I mean, and I've said this all along, and now it's 4 wins. This team does not have 4 wins. It might not have any wins, maybe one without Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs has put this team on his back, with all due respect to the quarterback, and taken it on his shoulders and said, listen, guys, follow me. And look what he did in this game. Coming in banged up, right? We weren't sure he was going to even play in this game, Murph, and he comes out and gives one of the best, if not the best, performance of his career.
You know, I love seeing the power that Josh Jacobs runs with. I mentioned last week he's like a smaller version of Derrick Henry, and this is one of those kind of games where you just see that evident. There's something about those Alabama running backs, man. They know how to run between the tackles, and that's where it gets frustrating to me when we get them outside that tackle box. And you saw it on that 86-yard run. I mean, he had blasted it right up the middle. Of course, had an amazing block by Jakob Johnson, who's having a killer year and one of the most underrated Raiders. And as much as we miss Alec Ingold, he's done an amazing job. Jakob Johnson has, but not to devalue what Josh did on the field today, because you're right, he's absolutely put this team on his back. Not only is he runs tough. We see him with that on that one play. He had a great juke on a play, then he had a stiff arm, and then took he's like the total package, man, when it comes to running backs. But then we see the hands today. We see him running like slant routes and stuff, and seeing him pick up big yardage like that. It's what an amazing year for him. I brought this up last week, and I don't have enough understanding of how franchise tags and things like that work. And I don't know if you can explain, if we need to defer to like a Mo, but what I'm wondering, Scott, is that when you decline a player's 50-year option, can you still franchise tag them? Because if his franchise tag number is reasonably affordable, then maybe there is a case where the Raiders hang on to Josh Jacobs, because I was thinking he was going to be gone no matter what, because someone's going to offer him stupid money. So I'm just kind of curious to where that'll go. But you're right. And to button it up, the idea that not only is he our closer on offense, but didn't we see a little bit of relief come from Derek Carr today? It's like the entirety of the pressure of the offense and the team's success in general is placed upon the shoulders of DC4. And when Josh Jacobs takes that sucker 86 yards to the house, Derek about collapses down on himself. But I thought in a way, it was just like, it was like you just felt him exhale that whole thing. Like, okay, I don't have to do this all on my own. You know that there is somebody else in the building that can put this team on their shoulders. And I just thought that was a great moment for the Raiders in a season where we've had a lot of things, a lot of headwinds, as the kids say.
That's right. And in fact, Derek Carr, of course, starts the game with an interception on a ball he overthrew a little bit and put it in, I'd say hot, if you will. Zinged it in to Davante Adams, who couldn't get there, and it's picked off. And he did the same thing with Foster Moreau on the second pickoff as well. So it was a little shaky to start there, but he pulled it together, had another efficient game. And I'll go to the stats now, looking at Derek Carr. Derek Carr, 25 of 36, 295 yards. He finally broke into the 3-touchdown game thing that we had heard so many people harping on. Of course, he had the 2 interceptions. But Derek Carr did everything he had. And the thing to me that really set up, outside of the two passes that were picked, Derek Carr had time to throw the ball. The offensive line deserves a lot of credit. They weren't perfect. And again, I'm going off watching the game. I watched the film later tonight and into tomorrow morning for our Tuesday show, and so I'll see what I see there. But overall, Murph, I got to tell you, that offensive line stayed together well. A couple penalties, including one in the red zone from Illuminor, which was not great. But overall, you can't complain what they did in this ball game. Not only running, they've been good at run blocking anyway the last several weeks, but also the pass blocking got a lot better today.
Yeah, a lot better. I think it really shows up, that performance is evident by looking at our success rate on third down. I don't know what it was for the entirety of the game, but I do remember going into halftime, we were like 5 of 7 on third down, which hasn't been the Raiders story at all this year. And so, you can't run the football effectively without a good offensive line. You're certainly not converting. You're certainly not giving your quarterback enough, time to make completions and to see the rhythm that Derek Carr has with Davante Adams in a game where Davante Adams wasn't the star of the game. I don't know what his final stats were, but he's been on a tear the past couple games, and now I think he took a little bit of a back seat in terms of stats and performance and targets and things like that this week. But when we needed a conversion on third down and we were throwing the ball, that Derek Carr, Davante Adams rhythm, that relationship showed up. And so, and you're right. I think it all anchors with that offensive line. And so much of, not to jump to the other side. I know we'll talk about it effectively later, but like the old school football guys will tell you, games were won in the trenches, and the D-line, interior of the D-line looked great today, and the freaking offensive line looked great today. And look at that. We won a football, and we won a close one.
Yes, and we're going to get to that defensive line coming up in the next segment too, but I do want to get to the stats because, to your point, one of the things that we've hit on all year and we talk about on this show, especially the postgame show, is the inability for the Raiders to convert on third down. A lot of that has been due to coaching. A lot of that has been due to that offensive line, but you look at today, they finished 8 of 14, 57%. For a team that's often in the 20 and 30% range, huge difference. And in my view, the reason they won the game. Also, red zone, 2 of 4. Now, this game might have been a little bit of a blowout had they been able to convert on one more. Right. But 2 of 4 at 50%, which was great. Also, goal to go. Remember how terrible they've been in goal to goal for like the last 4 years? They were 1 for 1 and goal to go. So there you go. All positive impacts. Now, again, people get mad at me because, all the people who want the number 1 or number 2 draft pick, they want the Raiders to lose, which still blows my mind. But nonetheless, again, it's about building positivity, seeing what you have. How are you going to build on this team? And Murph, I think seeing that offensive line, they're going to address the offensive line in the offseason, no question. There's still some things there. You're also still missing your top other 2 receivers in Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow, right? So you have guys that were out of the game too. So you're not going at full speed here, or I should say with your full complement of tools. But overall, the offense, the last 2 weeks, you have to go on your recency. 2 weeks, this offense is putting it together a little more regularly, and you like to see the consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. We're going to definitely address the offensive line. There was, as much as we could praise them tonight, we saw, Dylan Parham on that 3rd and 1 got absolutely annihilated on that play. You know what I mean? So there's not great. He's a young man. He's a rookie, and I get it. But yeah, we certainly need to add some depth. We need to add some help. But I think that it's encouraging. I think to me, my biggest takeaway is that when you see a unit, or and again, I know we'll talk about defense later, but the defensive struggles we've had, the offensive line struggles that we've had, to see improvement week to week, that's a sign of good coaching, in which we didn't see that early on. We saw regression, which is a sign of bad coaching. And so it was like, it looked like it was only going to go one direction. It looked like this thing was plummeting downhill. We were getting worse and worse and worse as the season went on. We were blowing bigger and bigger leads more frequently, losing on more, more impactful plays, not winning the down, right? All those things. But now all of a sudden we are start doing those things. And now they're, again, Seattle's not an easy place to play. You mentioned at the top of the show, they're a hot team right now. They're one of the stories of the league this year. A place where we don't historically do good. It's a crazy loud environment. All that stuff stacked up against the Raiders, a team that's been struggling. And so for us to then outperform where we've been and to continually improve, like, that's a sign of good coaching. And so that means that Carmen Brasillo's doing his work on that offensive line. We're talking about the offense, and so I think that's encouraging. Yes, plenty more work to do, but if this is a case where we start finding some building blocks as we, continue our 10-7 run and a run at the Super Bowl, Scott, because we're still going to win it. Now, back-to-back wins. I mean, it's clearly evident. But yeah, but all seriousness, it's nice to see at least this thing building in a positive direction after it was going so negative for so long.
Yeah, in fact, my 15-year-old son said, "Oh, so now they're 4-7." I said, "Yeah," and he's like, "Well, if they win 6 more, they might make the playoffs." I said, "Yeah, you never know, right?" I think their chances improved to 9% today or whatever, but nonetheless, again, you just want to see improvement and see what you have there, especially with the way it started this season and the coaching and all that. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into the rest of the game. We'll talk about the defensive line. We'll talk about the coaching. I know it's still an issue. A lot of people, as Murph mentioned, frustrated by some of the short yardage calls, and I think they have a point. We're going to talk about that a little bit here. So if you're listening to us on the audio, we're going to take a break. If you're listening to us and watching us on the live video, we're going to be right back in just a few seconds. You're listening to Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast, the postgame show. Raiders 40-34 winners over the Seattle Seahawks. Don't go anywhere, Raider Nation. Welcome back to Silver and Black today, the post-game edition. Scott Gulbransen, your host, along with my good friend Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. If you don't already subscribe to the podcast here, make sure you do it wherever you get your podcast. Just look for Silver and Black today. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit subscribe. Also hit the notifications bell. Also, do me a favor, go over to the Raiders Fan Radio profile on YouTube. Go follow them too. They're live on Wednesday nights, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you check it out. It is a great show. That's why we have Murf here, because we can't get enough of him. So his girl will kick him out. She's had enough of him, but we are not going to kick him out. We're keeping him around. But anyway, we're talking about this game. What a big win for the Raiders. And yes, it is a big win. People, 4-7. It's not. It's a big win. They string together two, which in a season like this is a big deal. You got to see a lot of great performances. And Murph, let's dive into what we saw went right. And the first thing I want to talk about was the interior of the defensive line. Patrick Graham's defensive play calling we'll get to later too, because that's going to be towards the end of the show in the we need to still fix this stuff portion of the show. But when you look at the interior defensive line, the addition of Tillery up front made a difference. He made some plays. He really created a presence there, Jerry Tillery. Also, Bilal Nichols. We saw the Bilal Nichols we thought we'd see all season out there. We saw Cleveland Farrell playing well. Of course, Maxx Crosby with another sack and a half. Should have been 2 sacks there. Geno Smith got rid of the ball towards the end of the game. Was very lucky to do that. But man, I'll tell you what, that's what you need. It goes to show you, Murph, if your interior defensive line can play at least at that level, that frees up Chandler Jones, who had a good game despite not getting another sack, but also frees up Maxx Crosby, who is the defensive player of the year in my mind so far this season. Talk about that, what you saw, how exciting that was from a fan's perspective as well.
Yeah, it was great. You know, the interior of when you start getting that pass rush in the interior, it does a few different things, right? Most importantly, like you're talking about, you start sucking up blocks and you start freeing up the guys that are really good at rushing the quarterback. You allow them to rush the quarterback. But also when you got 300-pound dudes falling around your feet as a quarterback, you start getting real unhappy real quick, and you start getting real happy feet, and you start moving, you know, what do they say? Off-base throws, right? You want to get them off balance. You want to get them out of their comfort zone. You get them out of the pocket. You get them moving. But it's an uncomfortable place for a quarterback to be. And what happens when they slide out of that pocket, when they're trying to create, or even, because you can't step up, right? So because you're getting that pressure, what happens is that's when things get loose, and when things get created. And we saw it. We saw of course it was on a fumbled on an exchange, but we saw Chandler Jones zip in there quick. It was nice to see 55 on the screens now a couple of times in a row. Yeah, we'd like to see him get some sacks. I think that's it's kind of funny to me that not that you said it, but the way that some of the way it's presented by the Raiders sometimes. They're like, oh, we love Chandler Jones. Yeah, he doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but we love what he's doing. It's like, well, didn't you kind of bring him in to show up on the stat sheet? Like, I don't know, I'm just call me crazy. But anyways, but it is nice to see him have a great play. But Maxx Crosby, like the fact that interior line had that presence, had that pressure, and then allows him to, when he gets a one-on-one, it's ball game. We saw him with the bull rush. We saw him with the duck. We saw him. I mean, that dude's now he's building up an arsenal of tools in terms of his pass rushing ability. And Maxx wasn't a bull rush guy. And now you see him just freaking rocking tackles back and just go. And I mean, he not only closed this game once, but closed this game twice. And we haven't had a closer on this football team on the defensive line since Khalil Mack. We thought Chandler Jones might be that guy this year, but it's not. It's Maxx Crosby, but that's okay. Like the idea that young man is earning every single penny of that 98.98. I mean, just absolutely amazing. And yeah, couldn't be more thankful as a fan to see where this thing's going on the defensive line.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other players we got to shout out, and I see everybody in the YouTube chat talking about other players who played well. Yes, Denzel Perryman had the interception, of course, Absolutely. And again, his second just phenomenal game in a row, and we expect that from Denzel Perryman based on last year. It took him a little bit to get started this year because of the injury. Billings, Nichols up front, I mentioned. Deron Harmon at safety continues to be the Raiders' best safety. Amik Robertson, Rocky Sin in spots. They both played. Amik Robertson had a couple nice really sequences against DK Metcalf. It's a tough guy, strong guy to cover. And so you're starting to see I think we talked about it in the first segment on offense, but you're starting to see it on defense too. These guys, it's belief, right? It's having the faith in one another and in your own abilities and in the system to play where you're supposed to play, do what you're supposed to do, and as they called in the Raider locker room, do your job, right? And you're starting to see these guys do it. I'm not saying these guys are lighting up the world on defense or that they're an all-pro defense. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying, though, is it's getting better. And if you're a Raider fan, when you have a season like this, as you and I said last week after the win, you just want to see improvement, steady improvement, so you know things are headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and when you look at, like, I'll give you another play that stood out to me. The Seahawks had a 3rd and 11, and they throw a screenplay, right? For those of us that remember the days of Jamal Charles taking screen passes to the house, like, that was like a very vulnerable spot for the Raiders. Like, previous versions of the Raiders, we get gouged on that. Like, when everyone on the planet knows what they're doing on a 3rd and 11, throwing that screenplay, or for whatever reason, it would freaking torch Jason Tarver's defense. You know what I mean? So, like, the idea that, like, now the Raiders then completely collapse that play, shut it down quick. Like, those are the kind of things that I gave Patrick Graham all the crap in the world. I was calling for the guy to, like, I mean, not that my opinion matters, but I'm like, this guy needs to go. Like, we got Rob Ryan in house, like, give him a headset and let's move on. You know what I mean? But, like, look at now, all of a sudden the Raiders are making plays. And I thought that was a, evidence of, because again, you see that kind of stuff and it just, like, it's, I don't want to play down the actual the seriousness of the condition of PTSD, but, like, when you got, like, as a Raider fan, I'm like watching this thing and I'm like, oh no, here it goes. Like, this is where we see some goofy, you know what I mean, some 80-yard play out of nowhere. But that's not what happened to this team on this day, and so you got to chalk that up to not only improvement but better coaching. And so I got to give the Raiders credit, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was. And I think that's what you have to look for. I mean, Webb played well too. Kevin, our good friend Kevin Wynn out on YouTube talked about that as well. Agreed. And that's what you do when you have a win like this. What you see is everybody playing well. Now, were there plays that they didn't play well? Yes, we saw that sequence where the Raiders defense over the middle, there's seemingly nobody there, and that's a scheme issue. Don't know what's going on there. I have to look at the film to understand it. I can't really comment on it other than I know fans noticed it, and of course the commentators talk about it, so fans jump on it quickly. But I'm not sure what happened there. But overall, I think that's what you're seeing is you're starting to see all of it sink in. And I know we all got impatient. We said, listen, okay, they're not executing, but yet the coaching wasn't good. And we'll get into the coaching again, like I said, in the next segment, because I think it deserves some addressing of it. But overall, you just like to see these guys playing as well as they are. Foster Moreau, another guy who's really stepped up. He had a couple big drops today, I would consider that, but he more than made up for it with the big touchdown in the back of the end zone, a beautiful throw from Derek Carr to Foster Moreau. But I also think it shows you that the offense and the play calling in those plays was right on. And I think I've seen, in my view, an improvement from Josh McDaniels on play calling as the Raiders are getting into the red zone or are going on key third down plays. Are you feeling the same thing?
Yeah, I do, and I can't believe I'm actually really getting behind what this coaching staff was saying in press conferences, because that's a few weeks ago, I'm like, these guys suck in a press conference. But, like, they were talking about execution, and they were talking about that, and at the time, it felt like they were really dumping it on the players, and it felt like they were like shifting blame or making excuse for or whatever, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, kind of like qualifying what it was that they were doing and it was great, but what these guys are doing on the field is terrible, and that's why we're not winning. But then you see today, okay, so, like, start off with defense. We'll come back to the offense because that's where you were leading with it. Defensively, we saw horrible missed tackles. Was it? Harmon, is that who was the running back that ran that ball in? Okay, so horrible missed tackles. We saw Roderick Teamer with a really, really bad read on a crossing route on DK Metcalf. Okay, so, like, you see those things. Well, that they were in the right spots. It really was poor execution. So coaching staff does its job. Now player needs to go and do their job. And on those cases, they fell a little bit short. Now, overall performance is fine because we won the football game, but you see where I'm going with it, right? So you start to see the execution. And then the same darn thing on offense. How many times has Josh McDaniels been criticized for the cute plays? And today, what do we see? First touchdown, wheel route, Amir Abdullah. I mean, Amir Abdullah hasn't really shown off his pass catching and running ability since the preseason. And now all of a sudden we got him running wheel routes down the sideline, catching touchdown passes. And we're like, let's go. Like, this is what we were looking for. But then even more so than that, again, to go back to play calling and the effectiveness of coaching and guys actually executing, the flea flicker. Mack Hollins was wide open. The offensive line holds up. They did their job. Derek flips it out there, doesn't do any goofy floater thing, doesn't overthrow him, just puts the ball on him, and Mack Hollins does the rest and takes it to the house. So it's like you kind of start to see this thing blend together and to do everything that everyone was speaking in the room about the high praise, but we didn't see the results on the field. Well, now we're actually starting to see the results show up on the field, and that's a great thing to see.
Yeah, and our good friend Rossi down in Australia says, "Are we really celebrating a defense that gave up 30 points?" And it's a good point. It's not lost on me, Rossi, but I will tell you this, and Murph, I'll get your comments on it too, which is you look at two of the scores that, first of all, to start the game, they get the ball in great territory. So the offense turned the ball over either via turnover or via a bad coaching play, in my view, on a short third and fourth down play where Josh McDaniels decides to pitch the ball back 5 yards to get 5 inches, and you gave Seattle the ball. You gave your defense a very short field. So I'm not excusing, because you just mentioned it, Murph, the bad tackling, some of the blown routes, all that kind of stuff. Still there. This is not a great defense. It's never going to be a great defense. There'll be wholesale turnover. I'm not saying that, but I have to say, up front particularly played a lot better than they have. Again, that does not mean they're a great defense or even a good defense yet, but they played well enough tonight, I think, to make the plays that they needed to make in order to give this team the opportunity to go down and win at the end, which of course they had to kick the field goal and then they won in overtime. Thank goodness. And the defense held up in overtime, which was a big part of this. So at key moments, they did what they had to do. Is that your assessment too, Murph?
Yeah, that's all they needed to do. We talked about it on our show this last week. I ran down all the defensive ranks for the Raiders since Derek Carr has been in the league, and like the highest it was in 2016 and 2017. And oh my gosh, look what happened in 2016. We made the playoffs. What a concept, right? And I'm like, and this doesn't absolve Derek Carr of any of his, lack of performance at times. But the idea is that offensively, we've been good enough to win a considerable amount more football games than we have, whether you put it all entirely on Derek Carr or not. The idea is that the entirety of the team is improved when your defense isn't in the bottom 5 of the NFL. And a lot of times it's 32nd, it's 29th, it's 28th. It's definitely in the depths. And so we don't expect this defense, I didn't expect this defense going into the season to be a top 10 defense. I don't think we need a top 10 defense, but a 16 or 17 might be cool. And if we get a top, that type of a defensive performance, that's all we need. Are we going to blow a few plays? Sure. It's going to happen because, like you said, Scott, we're going to run out of talent. We're going to have a lot of turnover. There's going to be a lot of change going on, but they're good enough. And if they're coached up to the point, which is seemingly they're headed that way, then we are good enough to be at least, top 20. And if we're top 20, we can make the playoffs. Like that. I'm not saying this year per se, but the idea is that we don't need them to be the 85 Bears. You know what I mean? Like we don't need them to be that. We just need them to be the 06 Colts.
There you go. So agreed. And I think that's where you have to get. And the Raiders playing like they're playing now, you just want to see who they have play to the best of the ability. And yes, the Raiders had to score 40 points. But again, I think that was exacerbated by some of the things we're going to talk about when we come back from the second break, which is some of the play calling on offense, particularly one play I think that got the hair on the back of the neck of Raider Nation to really stand up and say, whoa, what are we doing there? But that's going to happen in the course of a game too. Nothing goes perfectly. If you watch other NFL games like I do all day long on Sundays, you see lots of questionable things happen. So the Raiders aren't alone in it, but it's what happened. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, for our audio folks, we're going to take a break. On video, we're going to come right back as well, and we will get through the rest of our take on this game. You're with Murph and Scott here on Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. Silver and Black today, the post-game edition. The Raiders 40-34 winners in overtime. Yes, it had to be in overtime. They couldn't do it in regular standard 4 quarters. They had to play that 5th quarter, but it works out great for the Raiders. This is Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Scott Gulbransen, your host, along with the voice of the fan, Murf from Raiders Fan Radio, is with us, and we are talking about this game. Also, you look at, again, from an offensive standpoint, we talked about Josh Jacobs, 33 carries, 229 yards. Zamir White finally got 2 carries, 28 yards, had a couple nice runs, as well as Amir Abdullah with 3 for 16 and Derek Carr for 2 for 10. And then receiving Devontae Adams seemed like a quiet night, but he had big catches when he needed to. 7 grabs for 74 yards, targeted 11 times. Touchdowns from Mac Hollins, Amir Abdullah receiving, as well as Foster Moreau, and of course the big run by Josh Jacobs. All right, so Murph, let's get into the things that could have gone better, despite the fact that everybody should feel good about tonight's win. You look at the fact that that 4th and inches near midfield for the Raiders. Josh Jacobs is running all over the Seattle defense. So you understand, hey, I'll go to Jacobs too. You also talked about Jakeem Johnson, how he was going nuts. He was slaying people. I said he was murdering people at the line. Some of the blocks early in that game, I felt them at home. I mean, my bones rattled. This guy was just phenomenal. And so they line up, I'm thinking quarterback, or I'm thinking you put the 2 backs and you just let him do his thing. Instead, Josh McDaniels does a pitch that's basically 4 yards back. The Raiders lose yardage. Ball goes back to Seattle, who goes down and scores. These are the kind of plays that you're still seeing a handful of during games, and they can have significant impact. It's the only thing, in my view, that worries me about Josh McDaniels, and he's learning. And I guess now they're 4-7. To your point, this isn't like a 7-3 or an 8-2 football team where they're thinking about playoff seeding. They're just trying to figure it all out. Still, though, you see plays like that, and you just got to wonder, now, we're not coaches. I have not accomplished anything that Josh McDaniels has accomplished, Murph, but those kind of things, they drive fans crazy. I can only imagine how some of those players feel on the field, even if they're believing in themselves.
I don't understand either, and I've never understood something, frankly, about Derek Carr on short yardage, and I don't think it's Derek's fault. Why is it that we don't sneak the ball more?
Yes.
I mean, you got gangly Tom Brady, who is like can lean forward and seemingly pick up 2 yards at any time. You got Derek Carr, who's 6'3", 215 some odd pounds. We know he's a big, strong guy. We've seen, Lord, he doesn't own any shirts without sleeves. We know he's a big, strong guy. Like, why don't we just have him lean forward and pick up? Like I can't think that there's something that Derek is incapable of, but no one's ever done it. Like, I don't know how many sneaks that guy's got in his career, but it isn't many, because we don't rarely ever see him do it. And I've never understood that, why the Raiders don't just let him freaking just lean forward and get behind freaking Andre James and at the time Rodney Hudson and just freaking get that 6 inches. And so, so I'm with you. It's a very frustrating thing. And then especially knowing that Josh Jacobs, like his strength, and I get, the running off tackle, and I get all that and creating space. And on that short yardage play, they spread everybody out and they pitched him out. And so that's because they were trying to create room out there. But to me, I've just never understood it. It used to drive me nuts with Marshawn when it was a 3rd and 1, and we pitch it out to him, make him run 7 to get 1. And here we got another case of it. You need 6 inches, or why not Jakeem Johnson? Why just turn around and give it to him? You know what I mean? Or have Derek step out and direct snap it to Josh. I don't know. There's something else creative you can do, not only within the tackle box, but within the guard box. Like, just freaking punch that sucker up in there.
And it's real interesting. And I'm sure in the post-game press conference, which we'll analyze on the next show, and I know you guys talk about on your show on Wednesday as well, I'm sure they'll talk about it. Somebody in the media corps will ask about it. it seems odd to me because I think everything else with Josh McDaniels that was really frustrating, and you could see from the outside from a coaching perspective, especially on offensive play calling, has gotten better, I believe, over the last 3 weeks. Okay, so you've seen it markedly get better. You're starting to see plays that are going. The trick plays aside, which of course the flea flicker worked beautifully today, as you mentioned earlier. But when you look at that, you think to yourself, okay, everything else seems to be trending in the right direction. The players on board, they believe in it, they're executing those plays, but then you see those plays and you just wonder, what is it about it? And maybe somebody out there in the chat will tell us, because I know we have a bunch of coaches and stuff that watch us, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it happens, but I know for a fan, it gets very frustrating because you just don't know in a play. So now the Raiders next week, they go in back home and they're going to play the Chargers, who had a big win today on the road as well. And so you're going to face a better team, I think, in some ways, a matchup. And it's an intra-division meeting as well with the Chargers, the hated Chargers. And so it's going to be a lot different. And so a play like that, luckily the Raiders recovered from it, but you don't always recover from plays like that.
Yeah, and of course, like you said, no one knows coaching more than YouTube, and no one knows, general managering better than Twitter, right? Like, why go back and watch old Vince Lombardi videos when you can go to YouTube? But yeah, but I'm with you. It is confusing, and I'm looking forward to those answers as well. I mean, I think that there's and not to just completely reiterate what you said, Scott, but I thought it was a very salient point that, like, Josh McDaniels has clearly improved on his play calling in terms of, like, I think he might be accepting some of the limitations that we have on offense, maybe accepting some of the, the lack of understanding or lack of knowledge, or whatever the case may be. Maybe it's just lack of familiarity. Maybe it's lack of talent, whatever those things are. It felt like he started to, like, pull back away from the cuteness factor a little bit, and then was a little more strategic with the cuteness factor. And we, like, again, we saw it a couple times tonight. One worked tremendously, one didn't work so well. But then overall, though, it seemingly looked pretty good. Then again, so again, it comes down to execution. And, I think Derek's got a few throws he wants back on there, during the game. But then that said, then you got Devontae Adams, though, bailing him out on a couple throws. One in particular, that one-handed grab might be the most underrated pass catch that we've seen all year long. And I know it wasn't like some crazy OBJ, like it was super high elevation back up, but just the idea that it's, to me, this is, and I won't go all on a tangent here, Scott, but one of the most amazing things about Cliff Branch, about watching Cliff Branch play. Yes, he was fast. He was incredibly fast. But what made him great, what made him a Hall of Famer, was his ability to adjust to the football. That's what made him great, because he was so fast and so explosive to still be able to adjust to the football at the last second. That's what made him great. He did in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. Seeing Devontae Adams do what he did tonight to make that absolute last-second adjustment to where the defender had no idea what was going on and pull that sucker in with one hand, that was impressive. Like, if you're a fan of football, watching a play like that, I mean, just amazing. So, anyways, I know we're on coaching and all that, but I thought that,
no, that's huge.
It's just those are the kind of things that makes coaching good, right? When you have that kind of execution or success on the field, that makes the coaching look that much even better.
Well, and I'm not getting lost in the fact that they won the game and there were great calls too. I mean, we're just focusing on these because it happened several times during the game. And it's just one of those things you want to talk about, because anytime you win a ball game, of course, you want to give credit for all the things that went right, but you also continue to look at improvement. And so how do you improve things? And that's certainly one of the improvement. But you mentioned the Devontae Adams catch, phenomenal. He was held as well. That's what made it that's why he had to catch it with one hand. And again, I know Raider fans really like to complain about the referees, and I understand it. I don't do it as much, and I tend to give you guys crap about it. And so I'm not going to complain about it, but that should have been a call. It was not a call. It should have been a call. That crew, by the way, not only on Raider games, that crew, every game I watch them, are terrible. So it's just a bad crew. And so there was calls terrible on both sides of the ball, and the 10-minute freaking review on the DK Metcalf no catch. I mean, this is where, but see, I always tell people this, though, Murph, as bad as that is, people, things got to change. This is ridiculous. How does the NFL allow this to happen? It was longer than a baseball replay, which it was, is the fact that the NFL doesn't care because you keep buying the product. So we all watch football and we love to complain about it, but it doesn't make ratings go down. So unless they lose money, they're just going to be content to let those little things happen, which is unfortunate. But I want to
like that. And
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
And like OG Raider fan will tell you, hey, look, we've always had this. This has always been the condition of Raider teams. But guess what? We used to win anyways. You know what I mean? So I would just say this to you, Raider fan, like, don't act brand new, as the kids would say, right? Like, this is what happens to us. So we're just going to win anyways, right?
Absolutely. There you go. Defense, though, again, I want to, because the Raiders have had how many seasons now trouble sacking the quarterback, right? And it's been a contention this year too. They only had 9 sacks coming into this game. Excuse me. They only had 14 sacks coming in, or 15 coming into the game. I'm getting my number wrong. I should have wrote it down. But anyway, Maxx Crosby had 9 of those. You come in today, Maxx Crosby has a sack and a half to bump that up. Billings had a sack, and also Bilal Nichols had a half sack with Maxx Crosby on the one on Geno Smith. So good to see that as well, and some of these numbers going in the positive direction. Murph, you look at this team now, 1-2 in a row. Again, anytime, you're not going to make up for talent deficiencies. Let's be straight about that. But what you do is you continue to gain confidence. You play better, hopefully. You play to the full extent of your abilities, at the very least. So that's what you have to hope from this Raiders team as they get set to go home for the first time in 3 weeks and host the Chargers in a big game, because the Chargers and the Raiders are 2-2 in the division. I know the Chiefs are there and all that jazz, but at least you can start to look at that and say, hey, you know what? Let's get a game up in the division and be just behind the leader in the division. You could get second place in the division. Little things sometimes can make you feel better, and that could be one for Raider Nation. But going into this game, that confidence, these 2 wins, no matter how they won the game, is big for this team as they continue to build that confidence and believe in themselves, believe in the system, believe in their coach.
Yeah, that's a great call out, Scott. And, and road wins in the NFL are not easy. You know what I mean? So now to go back home after beating the Donkeys and and now beating the Sea Chickens, and now we got a shot at the Dolts, which when we know we can take care of business at Allegiant Stadium. It's how we ended the season last year. I think the Raiders are going to have a lot of confidence going into this game. I think Raider Nation is going to be firing on all cylinders. I'm trusting that with this recent run of success, we'll see maybe not so much that stupid powder blue and yellow in the stands, and Raider fan will show up and we'll support our boys and keep this thing going, man. Because look, I look at it like this, and this is just, and I'm not going to tell anybody how to fan their fandom, and I respect all Raider fans, whatever your take is, as long as you're passionate about this football team, I don't care about anything else. Everybody's got their own takes. Everybody's got their own opinions. My opinion, though, is that in a season like this, where the expectations were high, they performed low early on, I look for things to root for. And, you start with your division. Can we win some division games?
Yeah.
Those got to be now our Super Bowls. Yeah, it's nice to beat, the Seahawks, but can we beat the Chargers, a team that freaking took us out earlier in the year? Can we beat them? Can we beat the Niners? Can we beat the Chiefs? Can we get an advantage in the division? Look, I don't want my team to finish third in the division. Certainly don't want them to finish last. So just like you're saying, Scott, if we can leapfrog the Chargers and then take our position right behind the Chiefs in second place, like, that makes me proud as a Raider fan, because that means that our team is better than 2 of the others within our division. And so, like, those things you start to at least build, I'm always proud to be a Raider fan. That will never subside, but it makes you proud of their performance on the field, which is, it's kind of a nice to have. It's not a must for me, but it's a nice to have that the team actually does well. So despite how the thing started, despite whether whether we're going to make the playoffs or not, despite where we're going to draft, none of that crap matters. All I care about is how this team finishes out, how we look week to week. And I'll say one last thing to those of you that are really hammering on this draft thing: lighten up, man. Look, if you got a good GM, he's going to freaking draft well. Okay. Yeah. Look at all the different drafts that the Steelers have had over the years, or that the Patriots have had over the years. They never were drafted in the top 10. So don't give me that whole idea or notion that we have to be in any particular position to perform well in the draft. The draft is a damn crapshoot. We got 800 freaking picks. Let's let Dave Ziegler go to work, do what he does best, and hopefully pull some damn talent in this draft and not sweat where we draft. Like, really? Like, come on, we're barely halfway through the season and we're worried about where the Raiders are going to draft. Let's just worry about just win, baby. What a concept.
And you know what? The draft thing comes down to this. Yes, there will be great players at the top of the draft, defensively, offensively. But my read on the Raider fans who are really focused on staying in the top 10 of the draft is because they want another quarterback. And look, if that's your view,
good, yeah.
but if that's their view, totally fine with that. I'm somewhere in the middle with that equation, and so I get it. I understand it. They need the quarterback of the future. There might be a quarterback of the future that you could develop later in the draft, but a lot of people want that quarterback because it's a good quarterback class. So I think that's where the division line comes back. If you're happy with Derek Carr, want him to be back next year, then you don't really care about being in the top 10 or even really top 12. If you do want another quarterback, you absolutely want to be there. So I think there's some of that involved here because everything has to come back to the common denominator, which is number 4, right? I mean, it just seems like it has to. And that's fine. People have their view.
And maybe we pull a Hendon Hooker or something in the 4th round and develop him and let him recover from his ACL and be 45 years old when he's a rookie or whatever the heck is going on with that guy. But you know what I mean? Like there's options for the team, but like, the old adage goes, Scott, and I will stand by this forever, is that you draft superstars in the 1st round. Sure. You draft the flashy, but you draft championship teams and depth in the later rounds. That's where you build your team. And so like that to me is way more important than a top 5 pick.
Particularly 3rd and 4th round. I mean, you look at currently the Raiders whiffed on a lot of those, although they hit on the 4th rounder with Maxx Crosby and Hunter Renfrow. If he can come back and play like he has, then you still got some of those guys around. And that's where you can really, I say, butter your toast, if you will, with that. Yes. But Murph, the other thing here too, and again, people know I'm not here. I don't blow smoke and rainbows up your backside. Okay. But you look at the Raiders and you say, okay, they've won 2 in a row now, lots of things to fix, but a very good game, a very good performance overall when you look at what they were able to do on the road 2 weeks in a row against a Denver team that might be the worst offense in the history of the NFL, and I'm not kidding when I say that. But they now host the Chargers. If they can beat the Chargers, all right, and then they're going to face a bad Rams team on Thursday night, I'm telling you, you suddenly could say Raiders win 5 in a row. I know I'm getting ahead. I'm putting the cart before the horse here. All I'm saying, though, is you build and you take one game at a time, right? So you got to worry about the Chargers only. But I'm telling you, the Raiders can start to really put together something here that makes them feel good about themselves. And more importantly, it gives Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels the ability to, and I had somebody on Twitter calling me out because I said they should run Jacobs less tonight because we knew coming in he was injured. Now, maybe that was all folly and it wasn't as true as we thought it was because he certainly didn't look like he had anything wrong with him. But I do think, we saw Zamir White on a couple plays. I think you need to see more of him. You need to see some more of these guys. And they seem to do that. It's not huge amounts of carries. It might be 2 carries here, 3 carries there, whatever it is. But I think if you can start to put these together and start to put guys in and understand what their ability is, but still win ball games, that really is the perfect combination. And I think the Raiders, if they play and tighten up a little bit from where they were tonight and stick with the Chargers, it's going to be tough because of the defense. I understand that. But if the offense can continue to execute well, if they can get Renfrow and Waller back soon, they might be able to go on a little run, which is what I thought Raider fans should look at as, hey, that's our playoffs. If we can get on a nice 3, 4, 5 game run and beat a couple rivals in the process, good for them.
Yeah, and that was what we were looking for earlier in the season, and then we had that as an unfortunate couple games like against the Jaguars and whatnot. And so, things didn't quite take the momentum turn that we expected they would, but it kind of did. It just did it a couple games too late. And so I'm with you. And so if we can turn this thing around, like I'm a delusional Raider fan. I will own that because that's just, and I'm going to, whatever. But I think there is if you can look at this thing objectively, there is a very real world scenario where, like you said, we know we can beat the Chargers. Anything can happen in a division game anyways, but they're not world beaters this year. And then we're going to take on the Rams, and clearly they're not world beaters this year. So yeah, there's a very real world scenario where the Raiders go on a really good run. And when teams go on really good runs and you're playing confident, like that's where the whole thing, and we've talked about this numerous times, then all of a sudden the culture of the locker room, the culture of the organization, and I don't think it's unhealthy now, but that culture of that expectation of winning can propel teams that are mediocre or maybe, lacking talent in certain areas to overperform and to outplay. And so then we do finally go to Arrowhead at the end of the year, or we do, you know what I mean? When we do start to have those types of more consequential football games, I was worried that we were going to get flexed out of the Sunday night game, most importantly, because we're going to that game against the Patriots on Sunday Night Football. But I'm thinking, oh, there's no way they're going to let our two teams play for it. But if all of a sudden the Raiders are on a run and the Patriots are looking at a potential playoff spot, all of a sudden that Sunday night game has some serious consequence.
Absolutely.
And it matters. It absolutely matters. And so that now the Raiders are going to be on the biggest of stages. They're if and it's an if, but I would hope that there's an opportunity for us to build on these next couple games. And then all of a sudden we're playing New England at home on Sunday Night Football with consequence. Who knows what they can do in a game like that? So I think there's still a lot to look forward to in this season.
Absolutely. And it's most definitely one game at a time. You have the Chargers coming up on Sunday, and that's who they need to focus on. But it would be great for this team to factor into the playoffs, even if they aren't going to the playoffs, meaning imagine you can spoil seeding for the Chiefs that last game of the season, or you can spoil the Chargers even getting into the playoffs, or any of the AFC teams that the Raiders compete against. It would be phenomenal to be able to do that in a season where you've seen this. Just looking for growth, looking for the team improving in key areas, all three phases of the game, playing good complementary football. Even if they would have lost tonight, again, you and I talked about it last week. Even if they had lost tonight in overtime by a field goal because of what happened, you'd have to say, hey, look, yes, defense still deficient, but you know what? They went out, they played hard, it went back and forth, they executed when they did. The other team was just better and at home, right? But they didn't. They pulled it out, which was a big deal to win in overtime 40 and put up 40 points on that Seattle defense, which isn't the best in the world, but a pretty good defense, and a team that came into that game at 6-4, I believe. So a good night overall, Murph. And now they get ready for the Chargers. It should be an exciting week. I think the fans will be riled up. And of course, Charger fans, because they won a game at the end, are going to be talking a lot of trash to Raider Nation. I enjoy the back and forth since I grew up a Charger fan and used to follow the team. So it'll be a fun week for that. But Murph, tell everybody, too, about your show, because I want to make sure before we go, we like to do that. Tell everybody about Raiders Fan Radio. Tell everybody about the One Nation Foundation as well. I know you'll be in Las Vegas. I think it's in December 16th. Is that the date? For the Bolitnikoff Crab event. So tell everybody about that, and tell everybody when they can watch the show.
I appreciate that, Scott. Yeah, so we go live on YouTube at youtube.com/Raiders Fan Radio every week on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern. You can join us there live, or you can find our show on any audio podcast just by searching Raiders Fan Radio. And any of the support that you give us through our show, it introduces new advertising opportunities for us. So we appreciate your support in that way. And what we do with that money, whether it be from advertising or direct donations that we get on the Super Chat and YouTubes, or any of the money that we raise with Raiders Fan Radio, we give it to our nonprofit, which is called the One Nation Foundation. You can find that at onenationfoundation.net. And we give to all exclusively to Raiders-related charities. And as Scott mentioned, we're giving to the Bolitnikoffs coming up here in just a few weeks, coming up quick at their annual Crab Fest, and look forward to being there and presenting a big fat 5-figure check on behalf of our listeners and behalf of our audience to the Bolitnikoffs. We appreciate them very much. And for those of you that are on the video here, I'm wearing the Raiders Fan Radio holiday shirt. You can get this thing. It's only going to be available until the end of the year, and 100% of that money is going to go to our nonprofit. So we appreciate, again, all your support. And even if you can't help us out monetarily, just give us a like, give us a thumbs up, smash the bell, stab the links, as the kids say, do all that crazy stuff. And just help us out, get the word out for Raiders Fan Radio. And we appreciate you very much. And Scott, as always, my friend, I appreciate you, and the platform that you give us here on Silver and Black Today is always very, very much appreciated.
Oh, we appreciate you guys, and they do such great work. And it's really about Raider Nation helping Raider Nation and helping the world around them, joining together as a family, as a community. And luckily, through the One Nation Foundation, Murph and his team are able to do that. It's amazing, amazing work. And Murph, we love having you on the show to hear from you. And I know it's a popular segment, and we certainly appreciate that. And we will talk to you next week, hopefully after a Raider win against the Chargers at home, right?
Absolutely. So I'm going to be back in the great state of Mississippi next week too. I'll be coming to you live from the BetMGM Sportsbook at the Gold Strike Casino. Yeah, so that ought to be fun. But look forward to that, and appreciate you very, very much, Scott. Look forward to seeing you, Raider Nation. See you next week. Let's go beat the Dolts.
There you go. Follow Murph on Twitter, by the way, @_Murph is where you can find him. Of course, Raiders Fan Radio as well on Twitter. And do me the favor, make sure you go over to YouTube and follow them, hit that notifications bell, and take part in their show. It's great, great fun. I'm in there and always just laugh. I'm usually having a cigar and a bourbon when I watch them because that's the kind of show it is, by the way. It's awesome. It's great. So make sure you do that as well. Do us a favor, too. Make sure you subscribe to our show podcast as well. Anywhere you get your podcast, we are an Odyssey original podcast. We appreciate it. We're still third in the country behind the Eagles and Cowboys podcast. So the more you download, the more you can put subscriptions up there and also do auto downloads, the more you help. Because I know Raider Nation doesn't want to lose to the Eagles or the Cowboys, even in the podcast world. So help us do that. But Mo and I, very, very humbled by your support for us to be number 3 out of 32 teams is amazing. Not only that, but we're top 10 amongst all of their sports podcasts. They are a huge network, Odyssey. Of course, they own a bunch of radio stations, including 98.5 The Fan, where you can hear our show on Sundays at 9 a.m. as well. So make sure you do that. Also subscribe here to our YouTube channel so you see our new videos. Hit subscription plus the notifications bell. And also, we will be back on Tuesday. Mo Moten will be back. Yes, he's finally better. He was back working football today, and so we're glad that he's got his voice back and he can actually come back on with us on Tuesday. So for Murf, for Mo Moten, I am Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black today. Raiders 40-34 winners over the Seattle Seahawks in overtime, moving the record to 4-7. It's a win for Raider Nation. Enjoy your week, and we will talk to you guys on Tuesday.